Before I begin, I would really like to sincerely thank the scientific committee of the QuanTIM Webinars PhD Student Award. I am truly honored by this recognition, and I'm very grateful about the interest that my work has received. Really happy to be here today to share my work with you. A little nervous, I have to admit, but mostly excited. So without further delay, I'm going to begin my presentation, which, as you've just heard, is titled Methodologies to Improve the Role of White Matter Hyperintensities as Neuroimaging Biomarkers of Alzheimer's Disease. Okay. I want to start from the main focus of my work. So the focus of my whole PhD has always been represented by white matter hyperintensities that can be defined as areas of abnormal intensity on brain magnetic resonance imaging, as you can see from the image over here. From a pathophysiological viewpoint, WMHs are normally associated to pathological changes such as demyelination or axonal loss, but they're also associated to alteration in the interstitial fluid mobility and an increased water content normally. As regards the main factors that actually cause WMHs, we have, without a doubt, advancing age, which is the only non-pathological condition. As for the pathological part, the factors include diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, hypertension, and especially small vessel disease, which is now recognized as the primary cause of this lesion. And it is a condition that actually damages the small blood vessels in the brain, normally leading to vascular dementia. Okay. Besides the causing factors, the neurological findings that are WMHs are also linked in the sense they are in turn risk factors for other conditions. Okay. Specifically, they are associated to an increased risk of stroke, increased risk of developing cognitive decline or dementia, like I've said, and also they're associated with neurodegenerative processes. So looking at the main causes, there's a clear link, like I've said, between WMHs and vascular factors, okay, which is currently widely recognized by the scientific community. Conversely, as regards the risk factors, while many of them are well documented, the link between WMHs and neurodegeneration is currently less understood. And in fact, it remains nowadays very debated within the scientific community. And this is especially true regarding Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of neurodegeneration, despite the presence of numerous pieces of evidence linking this disease, so Alzheimer's, to the WMHs, okay, so the white matter lesions. Among this evidence, there's been studies that show that increased WMH load is present in symptomatic AD patients compared to healthy elderly people. An increased WMH volume has also been associated to a decreased time of conversion from mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's. And additionally, there have been predictive models of preclinical Alzheimer's, so asymptomatic Alzheimer's, that show that the white matter hyperintensity load was a stronger predictor compared to the standard cognitive tests that are normally used to diagnose the pathology. Okay, so all these studies, despite highlighting this link I'm talking about, they are, first of all, very scarce, and they mostly leverage imaging-derived measures rather than imaging themselves. And so from this main limitation, I developed the main scientific question of my PhD work, which is, can white matter hyperintensities in their three-dimensional features, which encompass not only volume, but also spatial location, intensity, and so on, can they aid the disease identification as regards Alzheimer's? So can they help us in the diagnostic process? If so, I mean, their inclusion within the current diagnostic criteria would be absolutely beneficial. To reply to this question, I have the main goal of my work, which was to develop deep learning models to classify the condition, so Alzheimer's, using MRI data, okay, so images. And then I wanted to apply explainability techniques to these models to see whether they were leveraging white matter hyperintensities more compared to other features or not. So this, like I said, represented like the major work package, the main goal of my thesis, and so the main work package, which is titled WMH Clinical Application and Relevance. However, to develop this work package, two other key elements are required. I need large multicentric data sets that are focused on those lesions, so on white matter hyperintensities, on which I can perform the analysis. And then I would also need accurate and reliable strategies to automatically segment these huge data sets, to segment lesions from these huge data sets. So for these reasons, alongside my main work package, I've also developed two additional analyses, so two different work packages that can be considered somehow preparatory to the main. The first deals with the concept of harmonization and is indeed titled Harmonization of WMH Measures. The second, on the other hand, has to do with multimodality, and it is titled QSAM repeatability and potentials in segmenting white matter lesions. Okay, I will begin with the first work package, so the one focused on harmonization. But first of all, let's see why do we actually need to harmonize the MRI data. Well, this is mainly because of the presence of intersite and interscanner variability in the MRI data. And this variation mainly arises from scanner-related factors. So they are linked to the machinery that we use to acquire the data. For example, inhomogeneities in the static magnetic field of the scanner, gradient nonlinearities, or differences in the utilized image reconstruction algorithms. All these variabilities have little impact on visual diagnosis in the sense they are not visible to the human eye. However, they assume a significant impact when we deal with automatic image analysis techniques, which, as you might reckon, are really important for this work. So this problem, so the presence of variability, like I said, has been tackled in one of my previous studies, so previous to my PhD, that focused on Bianca. That is, Bianca is a software for the automatic WMH segmentation. It is a supervised algorithm. The technique that it uses is actually a K-NAN algorithm, and it works also in two steps. It is normally trained on imaging data with manual labels, since it is indeed supervised, and then it can be used on new images to automatically extract the WMH segmentation. So interestingly, our former study, has discovered a significant limitation in this software, which is the fact that when Bianca was trained on data from one data set, but then it was tested on data that came from another data set, we saw there was actually a bias in the extracted WMH measures, WMH volumes, which was likely caused by the MRI variability that I just mentioned, because these two populations were biologically comparable. Okay. So the main solution that we proposed to this limitation was a set of recommendations relative to the image preprocessing steps and the algorithm training. In particular, with respect to the algorithm training, we saw that building training sets that are composed of multiple population, it was actually beneficial for bias reduction. And so what we did was we used two different populations that are the vital imaging sub-study and the UK Biobank, and we put them together to basically create a mixed training set that can be, it will be referred for this presentation as Bianca Vital UK Biobank. Okay. This is, I want to say, a rather simple harmonization strategy, which can be seen as a good thing. However, on the other hand, it was never been tested on external data set before my PhD work, so it lacked substantial validation, let's say. So for this reason, the main goal of the first work package of my work was indeed to validate Bianca Vital UK Biobank on novel imaging datasets of healthy aging subjects. I used, to be more specific, data from the OASIS 3 and the ADNI 3 cohorts. And you can see here in the presentation that the OASIS 3 cohort is treated as two separate subsets because the data within the cohort were collected using two different scanners. Okay. So for each of these three subsets, we created manual WMH masks to use as reference. I had 15 for both OASIS 1 and OASIS 2, and then I had 30 for ADNI 3. Okay. Okay, what did we do on this data? We carried out the validation process by considering two major aspects. The first was the segmentation performance, which we measured by comparing Bianca's automated segmentation with our manually created reference using overlap indicators like the dissimilarity coefficient. So this is one aspect. And in this regard, we evaluated two different scenarios. So the first, of course, is labeled as new, but it simply represents my interest, which is that of training on Bianca Vital UK Biobank and testing on the three cohort that I've selected for validation. And this was compared against a reference. Okay, so the other scenario was the site-specific training that is currently considered as the gold standard for optimal segmentation performance. It is indeed a strategy in which Bianca is trained and tested on data that come from the same cohort. Okay, so each of the three that I've considered in this scenario, they are treated as independent from one another. Okay. Okay. So we did, like I said, this comparison, the new training paradigm against the site-specific one, which is the really the optimal case. And here are report the results I obtained on the OS1 dataset. Okay, I calculated, like I said, overlapping coefficients, like the dissimilarity index, which is the first one represented on the x-axis, but also false positive and false negative ratios, which are respectively second and third. In this case, so for this first data set, the statistical analysis that we've conducted to compare the two training paradigms did not reveal a significant difference between the two. across all of the three metrics involved. As regards instead OS2, the site-specific training highlighted higher segmentation performance in terms of dissimilarity index and false negative ratio. However, it also highlighted higher false positive ratio compared to Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank. I think that overall we can see from this result that there's a certain superiority of the site-specific training, which was expected since it is, like I said, the gold standard. But it's important to note here that the performance obtained by Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank remains remarkably close. And fairly similar consideration can be drawn from the 83 subset, okay, where the site-specific also proved its superiority, but Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank remained very close in terms of goodness of the performance. At this point, we move to the second major aspect that we wanted to evaluate in the validation process, which is the ability of Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank to actually harmonize the WMH volumes. And so its ability to basically derive volumes that are comparable across different data sets that share the same biological characteristics, like OS1, OS2, and 83. Okay. And so, I mean, this is particularly relevant because, like I said at the beginning, what we found with our former study, so the main limitation was that we basically saw that when we were displaying the white matter hyperintensity volume, which is shown on the y-axis, against its primary covariate, that is age for healthy subjects, we were obtaining measures that were not comparable. Okay, like you can see in this plot over here, which is just an example, but just to give you the idea of what was the issue, the concern. And we simply, with this analysis, we went to see if by adopting Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank to derive these WMH volumes, okay, we could help mitigating this bias. Besides, we also wanted to compare the harmonization ability of Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank against Combat, which is currently the most widely adopted harmonization tool in this field. It employs a Bayesian framework to adjust for side effect while preserving biological covariates. I mean, yes, it's the main competitor so far. So the comparison was made to see whether we could be better than Combat or at least as close as possible, let's say. As you can see from the results, so the site-specific training, which is the plot on the left side, it revealed a significant bias between regression lines. We quantified this bias using a statistical test, which is the Johnson-Norman technique, which provides basically a region of non-significance, which means an age range on the x-axis in which we can consider there is no statistically significant difference in the WMH volumes across all data sets. As you can see, the site-specific training yielded no region of no significance. So it confirmed the presence of strong bias. On the other hand, although Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank yielded as a region, and even though this region is really small, I acknowledge, but the important thing to notice here is that there has been a very evident reduction in the bias if you look at the plot. Here is presented instead the comparison between Bianca-Whittle UK Biobank and Combat, and as you will see, Combat managed to achieve a greater bias reduction. However, it is crucial at this point to note that while combat has higher performance, it can only operate, so it has also a limitation, it can operate only on imaging-derived data and not on images themselves. So through combat, you will not be able to access the harmonized white matter hyperintensity masks, whereas with Bianca Whitehall UK Biobank, you would be. So this is something to keep in mind. Okay, so I'll now draw conclusions from this first work package. We have seen that Bianca's performance, it suggests it can serve as a viable alternative to the optimal training strategy. While it cannot match combat's harmonization abilities, it offers, it's pretty close, and it offers an advantage, which is that of harmonizing segmentations. And both of these aspects combined lead us to say that Bianca Whitehall UK Biobank is actually useful in multicentric studies where sometimes modular rating can be unfeasible or impractical. So this is a very nice result, I would say. Okay, I'll move on now to the second work package, which is focused on multimodality. First of all, again, let's ask ourselves, why do we need multimodality? Well, the reason is the fact that in some pharma studies, they've found that multimodality is key to enhance the performance of Bianca. And this is very relevant since sometimes we have seen that applying harmonization strategy leads to a slight decrease in the software performance, like we just said for the first milestone. So the solution that I proposed to this issue was to explore an additional MRI contrast, which is quantitative susceptibility mapping, namely QSM. This technique basically quantifies the spatial distribution of magnetic susceptibility within a tissue. And let me just mention here, I don't know if any of you know this, but it is not directly derived from the MRI scanner, but it is rather reconstructed from the phase signal of gradient echo sequences. Why did I focus on QSM? First of all, because QSM is known to provide valuable information on myelin densities, white matter microstructure, axonal integrity. So it basically has the potential to be included in the current WMH segmentation pipeline. However, it received very scarce interest in this context, and this is why I decided to get interested myself. So I have developed a specific analytical framework to assess this aspect. But before diving into this aspect, let me just outline some of the limitations of QSM, as it is in fact a modality that is severely affected by variabilities when extracted using different magnetic field strength, acquisition parameters, or even when reconstructed using different algorithms. So to face these issues, numerous studies have evaluated its reproducibility, so the level of bias across scanners and sites, but no studies had ever evaluated the scan-rescan repeatability, especially with respect to very important reconstruction parameters like the number of echo times used in the acquisition sequence. And this is the reason why I developed a first analytical framework that served as a prior to the second one. So in the first, like I said, I investigated scan-rescan repeatability, and I did that on a dataset of healthy volunteers. So basically every subject underwent the imaging session twice. and so that we were able to have the scan and rescan acquisition. And for each of them, I reconstructed the QSM using a varying number of echo times that went from 8 up to 3, okay? Well, down to 3, sorry. At this point, I developed with this reconstruction that I developed two analyses. The first one was a ROI-based analysis, and it consisted on the extraction of mean susceptibility values from both the scan and rescan QSM across different regions of interest. And for those values, those mean values, scan and rescan one, I calculated the intra-class correlation coefficient that was specific for every region. Then I did a similar thing, but instead of evaluating the scan and rescan mean value across regions, I compared the scan and rescan QSM value voxel-wise within all of the regions of interest that I selected. There were 7 subcortical brain nuclei relevant for neurodegeneration, like putamen, globus pallidus, caudate nucleus, and so on. Okay, so the difference is in one case we are comparing mean values, in the other we are comparing voxel-wise values. Here are the results of the ROI-based analysis. So you can see on the y-axis the intra-class correlation coefficient, which is a measure of repeatability, and on the x-axis you will see the number of echo times, okay, going from 8 down to 3. We set as threshold for good repeatability 0.75 from the literature. And what you can see in the result is that repeatability is actually influenced by the number of echo times used for the reconstruction. It's not true in every case, so not for all regions of interest, but for specifically the smaller ones, like amygdala and substantia nigra, you can see a certain trend of variability, okay? And normally, a higher amount of echoes resulted in better repeatability, higher repeatability. On the other hand, here are the results of the voxel-wise analysis. Like I said, we had ICC values for every point of the binary mass that encompassed all of the ROIs, and we had these values represented in a violin plot with a superimposed box plot for every number of echo times from 8 to 3. And even here you can see, probably even better than before, that the number of echo time has an impact on the amount of repeatability. In fact, with a higher amount of echoes, you will have higher ICC values, which are again on the y-axis. Okay, so after dealing, like I said, with the first part, I moved to the second analytical framework that was focused on the inclusion of QSM in the current segmentation pipeline within Bianca. In this case, I just let me say this, I did not test this on vascular white matter hyperintensities, so the one that I've introduced in the beginning, but I instead used a population of multiple sclerosis patients that had white matter lesions that are purely neurodegenerative, and this demyelinating lesions, okay? The rationale was to try and test this novel approach on a population that had lesions that we knew, in the sense they were only caused by demyelination, instead of to do it in lesions that also involved a fluid alteration, which are less known in QSM, let's say. So we had 17 subjects. We at first simply compared the gray level values of the white matter lesion against the normally appearing white matter to see through a statistical tests if there was actually a contrast between the two regions. And then we went on with the segmentation part. So I started by training Bianca with flare and amperage modalities, which are the most utilized one, and I obtained certain outputs. And then I repeated the same procedure, including QSM in the pipeline. And once again, I obtained an output. Both these outputs were compared against the manual reference, and so we were able to extract the dyes for both, and then to compare, of course, the obtained dyes one against the other. So the results of the preliminary analysis proved that for 14 out of 17 patients, there was actually an evident contrast between the two regions, so the lesions and the normally appearing tissue. Which means it's good. I mean, it's a fairly good result. And then, as regards to segmentation, we saw that the DICE index obtained using flare and amperage was significantly lower than the one corresponding to the flare plus amperage plus QSM case, and this according to the statistical test. And of course, like this result supported the relevance of QSM modality. So to quickly draw conclusions, we've seen that the good level of repeatability suggests that QSM can be used to segment white matter hyperintensity lesions without introducing biases in the results. And also the QSM seemed effective in enhancing lesion segmentation. However, we have to remember that further investigation on dataset that are focused specifically on vascular white matter hyperintensities are still needed to confirm these findings in the broader framework of my research. Okay, we can now finally look into the main work package, which is the clinical application and relevance of white matter hyperintensities. As anticipated, the aim is to use deep learning models and explainable AI to assess the diagnostic power of such lesions in a task of AD classification. And to do so, I did two different studies. A pilot study that focused on the OASIS 3 population and two-dimensional data. For this study, the WMH masks were segmented manually. So the XI analysis, explainability analysis, was conducted on a small subset of the original population, 8 out of 251 subjects. As regards the model, I used efficient at B0 for the classification and the occlusion sensitivity method for the XI assessment. Then I carried on with the main study that was done on ADNI cohort in three-dimensional data. The important part here is that the WMH lesion masks were not derived manually, but I used Bianca Whitel UK Biobank to derive them, since I've proven with the first work package that it could be done. And so in this way, I managed to obtain the masks for the entire population, so 611 subjects, much bigger. As regards the model, I used ResNet 50 and I used GradCam for the explainability assessment. I'll begin with the pilot study. So what I did was I fed flare images scans into the efficient FB0 model that was used to classify the pathology. The network was adapted to our classification tasks in the way that you can see here, and the performance is not reported because it's not the main focus of the work, but just now it achieved good segmentation performance with respect to the literature. But then we moved to the juicy part, which was indeed explainability. And we used as target basically white matter hyperintensities and the healthy tissue. So we wanted to compare their relevance. So specifically, like I said, we extracted a subset of 8 subjects. And on those data, we applied the occlusion sensitivity method. This algorithm basically allows to quantify the difference in the output probability estimated by the deep learning model. for a certain image when slightly perturbing the different regions of the image itself using a black patch. The result is then a heat map that represents the relevance exerted on the final classification by every different region of the image. So you can see here the heat map, and from the heat map we actually we multiplied it for binary masks underlining the white matter lesions and the normally the healthy tissue. And we computed the mean value for both, that I call them relevance values, and I compare them. Here are the comparisons for both the healthy controls on the upper panel and Alzheimer's disease data on the bottom panel. Okay. As you can see, so white matter lesions are represented through a blue box plot, whereas the orange one represents the normal tissue. As you can see, there was a significant difference in the relevance, which was it was higher for the WMH lesions for the Alzheimer's disease case, whereas no difference was highlighted for the healthy controls. And this actually suggests that the WMHs are used by the deep learning model to identify the disease presence. Okay. As regards the main study, I did something very similar. So I fed, in this case, two different combinations of modalities, so FLAIR plus T1 weighted and then FLAIR alone, into the ResNet 50 model. Even in this case, just trust me when I tell you the classification performance were pretty good, but they're not included here. What is important is that in this case, the target areas were not only the white matter lesions and the normally appearing white matter, but also 8 cerebral gray matter regions that represent an established biomarker for Alzheimer's, which is the medial temporal lobe. After the entire dataset was classified, I applied to each convolutional layer DRACM, which basically calculates the gradient, which means the derivative of the output score with respect to the features of the last convolutional layer. So this is basically another way to extract how much each feature contributes to the final prediction. So in this way, I was able to generate a single heat map for each layer of the model. And since each one of them highlighted feature at different granularities, I ended up computing the average of all of them, okay, which is the final one. The average was then multiplied in a similar way to the pilot study for the different binary masks underlying the target regions. So in this case, there's white matter hyperintensities. Then I did the same for normally appearing white matter and for all the 8 different medial temporal lobe parcels. Even in this case, then I extracted the mean values, which serves as a relevance measure, relevance value, and I compare them across different regions that I targeted. Here are the results relative to both combinations of contrast that I used, so FLAIR plus T1 and FLAIR alone. And as you can see, the first box plot, so the first green one represents WMH lesions, whereas the other one represents all of the other target regions. As you can see, white matter hyperintensities highlighted higher relevance measure, not only compared to the normally appearing white matter, which is the second one, but also compared to the gray parcels of the medial temporal lobe, which is pretty impressive because the MTL is actually the structure that is more looked at for the diagnosis. And this was confirmed by statistics. So to conclude, the pilot study basically found the preliminary evidence of the importance of white matter hyperintensities in the classification of IDE. And this was further sustained by the main study, which proved across a larger data set that the lesion carried greater diagnostic power, not only compared to healthy tissue, but also compared to established relevant biomarkers. Okay, with this, I think we've gone through all of the details of my work. I can just summarize very quickly and draw the conclusions. Well, first we have, I have extensively validated Bianca White UK Biobank, which is an openly available training set that allows to reduce the measurement bias when segmenting white matter hyperintensities from multicentric dataset. We found it is helpful in the context in contexts where manual rating is impractical. We have to, however, remind that it has a limitation. That is the fact that it must be used on population that have for each subject both FLAIR and T1 weighted images, which are the modalities that I used for its to build it. I mean, nevertheless. Since they're fairly common, I would say overall this work package derived significantly good results. Then we have seen that QSM has emerged as a valuable asset for lesion segmentation in a specific context of application. We have said the results cannot be generalized, but despite this fact, they all look promising. Expanding the data set and scope, let's say, would lay the proper foundation for translating the use of QSM into the current segmentation pipeline for white matter hyperintensity lesions. Finally, as regards XI, like I said, we have highlighted the relevance of white matter hyperintensities in both the conducted analysis. And this was relevant first because we use different deep learning models, then because we use different XI approaches, but also because we use different populations. So the overall study suggested a certain degree of reliability in our finding, and this is really positive. As regards the future development, I can just conclude by saying, the first would be the development of integrated approaches able to merge imaging-derived measures currently used in the literature with raw imaging data exploited here to allow for more comprehensive investigation into the effectiveness of white matter hyperintensity in the diagnosis, especially with respect to established diagnostic tools like neuropsychological tests that we have not seen in this work. And secondly, we would like to extend this analysis to a cohort of preclinical subjects rather than symptomatic Alzheimer's that would provide invaluable insight into the diagnostic powers of lesion at the very early stage of the disease progression. And this would be, to me, at least, fairly interesting. With this, I have concluded the presentation. Sorry for being 5 minutes late. Thank you very much for the kind attention.